The world of sports car racing. It's a bit complicated. I mean, there are so many different championships which include some form of prototype or GT car that it's rather difficult to keep track of. Plus, all of these championships have different class structures. Some of them have different classes which utilise the same car but are separated through driver categorisation, which in turn makes things even more complicated. Not even to mention how these classes and their rules can differ from season to season. Anyhow, when it comes to the cars themselves, the top echelons do have a fairly consistent roster with Hypercar, LMP2, sometimes LMP3, and GT3. Even when the names of those classes aren't all aligned, despite using the same cars. Either way, without complicating things further, that is generally how things work. However, sometimes a new class of car gets introduced, and that's what happened in the Grand Am series for 2013. To give a little bit of context, prior to 2013, the class structure in Grand Am was fairly simplistic. The top class was the DPs, the Daytona prototypes, and then the GTs, the Grand Tourers. Whilst a lot of the cars that raced in Grand Am were unique compared to other high echelon sports car championships at the time, it still followed the prototype/Grand Touring structure that those championships had. That would change though in 2013 with the addition of a brand new class with a whole new type of car. This was called the GX class. In the middle of the 2012 season, the GX class was announced as a means of adding new technology to the Grand Am series, along with adding new manufacturers to the championship. The cars would end up being the slowest of the three classes competing, but would be faster than the cars you'd see in the tier below the Grand Am series, which was then called the Continental Tire Sports Car Challenge. The most simplistic way to describe this class in my view is that it's effectively GT 3.5. Faster than GT4 cars, but slower than GT3 cars. I do hope this isn't too complicated. There were a number of cars confirmed that could be used for this class, some of which were rather interesting to say the least. Perhaps the most intriguing to me included a couple of touring cars, like the Ford Focus and Chevrolet Cruze from the BTCC and WTCC. Indeed, there were 13 different potential car options for the GX class. It seemed like a decent idea. Add a third class to the series, therefore adding more variety, bring in more manufacturers, increasing the car counts for races, and of course adding new technology to the series. It had a bit going for it. The most vocal new entrant would be the Mazda brand, who would be entering the GX class with a brand new car in the form of the recently updated Mazda 6, which would use a 2.2 litre turbocharged 4-cylinder diesel engine as its propulsion method. It would therefore create history for the Daytona 24 Hours, with it being the first diesel power car to enter the race. The then motorsports director for Mazda's North American division, John Doonan, who you may have heard of before, said, "We're happy to report that the engine is meeting the performance targets for both power and endurance. That means 400 plus horsepower for over 50 hours, with an engine that includes a very long list of production Mazda parts. This is not a pure race engine. It is a production block Skyactiv D. We're excited about having our newest engine powering our newest car." So let's get to the first race of the season, which, like always with the Grand Am series, began with the Daytona 24 Hours. The weekend would include 57 cars, albeit one of them didn't start the race. The GX class would include 3 Mazda 6s, 3 Porsche Caymans, which were effectively upgraded versions of the same Porsche Caymans you'd find in the Continental Tire Sports Car Challenge, and that was it. We'd only see 6 entries from the GX class. It also wouldn't end up being a very good race for the Mazda 6s. All 3 of them would retire and wouldn't make any more than 51 laps. 2 of the cars would be impacted by cylinder problems, whilst a third would have a rear main seal failure. A huge shame that they didn't make many laps, as they had some serious talent behind the wheel of these things. Drivers such as Jonathan Bomarito, Joel Miller, Tristan Nunez, Spencer Piggott, James Hinchcliffe, Marino Franchitti, Yojiro Terada, Tristan Vautier, and many others. John Doonan said, wait, hold on, did I just say
Tristan Vautier, the saviour of Dale Coyne Racing? What is it with this man appearing on my channel?
Sorry about that. Normal service shall now resume. That just left 3 Porsche Caymans in the GX class still running, and it wasn't exactly a close fight between them. The winner, Napleton Racing, with Dr. Jim Norman, Nelson Canache Jr., David Donahue, and Shane Lewis behind the wheel, who would finish 10 laps ahead of the Bullet Racing Porsche which in turn finished 11 laps ahead of the other Porsche run by BGB Motorsports. John Doonan said regarding the Daytona 24 Hours, "The Mazda and Speedsource engineers had over 400 hours on the dyno, but only a few on the track. Our on-track testing was limited in part due to the timing of our Mazda 6 production car launch, which prevented the team from getting on track as early as desired. The easy way out would have been a mid-season debut. But Mazda has never taken the easy path. We are a company of passionate car people with a passion for racing." Let's see how they'd get on just over a month later at COTA. However, we wouldn't see 6 entries in the GX class for this round. Instead, we'd see 3. 2 Mazda 6s and a Porsche Cayman. And it would be like this for quite a lot of rounds. Anyhow, despite both of them leading the GX class at different periods, the Mazdas would still have issues during the race, one of those being enough for it to retire midway through. These would allow the sole BGB Motorsports Porsche to have a comfortable 4-lap margin over the number 70 Mazda at the race's conclusion. The same 3 cars would enter the next race at Barber. The Mazdas would spend time in the lead again, and their lone rival would get into a bit of a Ricardo Zonta situation, having a heart-in-mouth moment in the process. However, the Cayman would continue, and as the number 70 Mazda had an electrical gremlin, and the fuel line needed fixing on the 00 Mazda, the BGB Motorsports Porsche won for a second time, with a 2-lap victory buffer. Next up was Road Atlanta, and this is where we'd see the Mazda 6 finally get their first class victory. The 00 would take the honours, with the BGB Motorsports Porsche collecting second, although that car did have a role earlier on in the weekend. It's clear though that the Mazdas were making clear progress. Sure, they only had one rival to trouble them, but still, irrespective of their amount of opposition, they were definitely going in the right direction. Next up was the Belle Isle Street Circuit. Also, the Street Track series will be returning in the future. The 00 would take a second victory for Mazda, with the Porsche in second. Then at Mid-Ohio, a Mazda would win again, but it was the 70 car this time, with the 00 retiring, thus again giving the Porsche second. At the Watkins Glen 6 Hours, the Porsche would have its first retirement of the season. Unfortunately for Mazda, the number 70 would DNF before the Porsche, meaning the BGB Motorsports entry was still classified second in the GX category, behind the 00 Mazda. Next up was the Indianapolis Road Course, and this time the 70 Mazda won, ahead of the Porsche Cayman, with yet another second, ahead of the 00 Mazda. At the fantastic Road America circuit, the number 70 Mazda was in the lead with just over 15 minutes remaining, with 13 seconds between the 3 cars. However, the 70 would shortly retire not long later, handing the lead to the Porsche, before the 00 Mazda passed the Cayman to make sure a diesel-powered machine still took the victory. After that, it was the Kansas Speedway Road Course. I didn't know this happened either, but hey, you learn something every day, I guess. The 00 would take the victory over the Porsche again in second, with a 6-lap gap between the two. The number 70 Mazda meanwhile retired in the first half of the race. The penultimate race was at Laguna Seca, and there was a new thing to factor in this class for this event. A 4th car, and one we hadn't seen yet either. A GX version of the Lotus Evora, run by SDR/Lotus Racing. The Mazdas would take a comfortable pole position, but almost immediately, a driveshaft issue of some sort put the 00 out of contention. The 70 Mazda made sure that victory still happened for the Japanese brand. However, with the Lotus not being much of a factor, albeit finishing ahead of the 00, the Porsche collected second again, heading to the last round at Lime Rock Park. The Lotus would certainly be a factor in class this time, not far off getting the GX pole. It would even take the lead at the end of lap 1, until it had nowhere left to go other than into the stricken GT class Porsche in the middle of the track, which all the other GX cars had enough time to avoid. So with them out, it was down to the 3 cars that had competed for the full season. And once again, a Mazda would take victory, this time the number 70. But the other Mazda would retire from the race, which therefore left the Porsche from BGB Motorsports to collect another second place. And whilst they did achieve this position 9 times on the trot, it was still important from a championship perspective. Whilst Mazda won from the 4th round onwards, both entries had chopped and changed in terms of who had the first place trophy at the race's conclusion. Plus, their difficult start to the season didn't help their championship aspirations. Whilst they would collect the manufacturer standings over Porsche by 14 points, none of their drivers would earn the Drivers' Championship. Instead, it would be heading to the only person who completed the whole season in a Porsche, and that would be Dr. Jim Norman. After winning the Daytona 24 with Napleton Racing, he did all the remaining races with BGB Motorsports. Partnered with drivers like David Donohue, Jeff Mosing and Spencer Pumpelly, he would beat 3 different Mazda drivers in the Drivers' Championship by 13 points, those drivers being Joel Miller, Tom Long and Sylvain Tremblay. Anyhow, as first seasons go, it perhaps wasn't the most enthralling, but still, what would 2014 bring for the GX class? Well, it didn't actually happen. You see, I probably should have mentioned this earlier, but midway through 2012, something bigger was brewing in the world of North American sports car racing. And that was that the Grand Am and American Le Mans series would be merging together in 2014 to create the series we know nowadays as the IMSA WearTech Sports Car Championship. And the GX class would not be continued into this new series. And none of the cars you saw compete in GX would be seen participating in this new championship, thus making the GX class a one and done category in sports car racing. The Mazda program would continue into the prototype class, with its diesel engines being put into the back of a Lola B12/80, so that may explain why there wasn't much in the way of entries in the GX class, because the cars would potentially be only used for one season before they'd have to be upgraded or changed to make them participate competitively in the GTD class, the replacement for Grand Am's GT class, or potentially not be able to compete at all. And whilst Mazda were potentially going to enter a Mazda 6 into the GTD class, they ended up going down the prototype route. It just didn't make a huge amount of sense to enter the category if they weren't likely to be used for more than a season. Mazda was seemingly keen to enter with their custom-built car as they wanted to demonstrate their diesel engine technology, and the Porsche came and made some sense in that it was an upgraded version of a car used in another championship under the same organisation. It's a class that perhaps could have had a future without the merger, and could have yielded a very interesting and varied grid of cars. Although, if I'm honest, I'm not all that disappointed at the loss of this category, when the merger has created an utterly thrilling championship that is growing its audience fairly rapidly. Plus, the GX class wasn't the most exciting from a racing standpoint, which perhaps isn't surprising given the amount of entries. To me, the most intriguing thing about this class is how the championship was won by just a single driver, which in endurance racing is not a very common occurrence, and in turn beat a manufacturer-supported effort. Sure, the effort was in its infancy stages, and for sure was getting better as the year progressed, but still, you've got to be in it to win it. And great consistency through the year really helped. And unless this class somehow returns in the future, Dr. Jim Norman might be the only human being to be a Grand Am GX class drivers champion in the history of planet Earth. Think of it this way, you're more likely to bump into an astronaut or an F1 world champion than you are a Grand Am GX class drivers champion. But with that in mind, that is going to be it for this video. Thank you very much for watching. What are your thoughts on the GX class? Are you glad it was a thing, or glad it may never return again? Say down in the comment section below. Also, if you did enjoy this video, then I'd be enormously appreciative if you did hit the like and subscribe buttons, as it'll allow me to make more content like this. Until next video though, be kind to each other, and enjoy the rest of your day.